Stay tuned to NFL news and plenty more next on SportsBar. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Sports Bar. I'm David Jackson, and I'm joined with two of the usuals here, Chris Warner and Travis Stanley. We've got a lot to talk about today, guys. Lots of football action out there, both college and pro. Now, no App State this past week. The Mountaineers were off. Great defense this week. Didn't give up a single point.
Yeah, exactly.
It's they always play open well. Yeah, they never score against them, so that's kind of tough. But I guess we'll start in the college football spectrum with a lot going on around from a national standpoint. I think one of the key storylines of the week was Ohio State. I mean, they played Northern Illinois, looked for the first time like the nation's number one team, was either disinterested, disengaged, something. But the Buckeyes did not look right for the first time under Urban Meyer in a while.
Yeah, and that's worrisome playing against Northern Illinois. But, I mean, if anything, Urban Meyer knows you got to just keep winning games. In college football, I mean, it's become this sort of thing where with the playoffs now, just survive. Just continue to win and survive. And they were able to do that, so they'll be okay. Last year, Cardell Jones obviously played great. JT Barrett played great. They'll figure out production by them.
Obviously playing Northern Illinois, it doesn't necessarily take their best effort to get by them. But I'm still the opinion that if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterback. I would like them to settle on JT Barrett and just ride that out. And if he, if he loses that job later in the season, 3 or 4 games from now, then so be it. But I think they should settle on one or the other.
It does seem like Ohio State's best offensive teams have come when they've had identity through their quarterback. Now, certainly last year was kind of a unique situation where you have that changeover so very late in the season, and Cardell Jones, let's be honest, kind of pulled a rabbit out of the hat there toward the end. But to go into the year with all of the resources that Ohio State has, to go into the year with that kind of system just didn't look like it was really set up well from the start. And I think now against a defensive team that, at least by max standards, is usually pretty good, you're going to falter against a team like that in your Ohio State. What does that say for your Big Ten chances?
Yeah, that's scary, especially considering this is a team that's going to have to play Michigan State, which just moved up to number 2 after some of the losses this weekend. And, they got to figure it out. I know they won't play Michigan State until the end of the year, but if you go into that game and your quarterbacks play like this, you're going to get trounced.
Yeah.
We'll talk ACC football in a minute, but first you got to talk SEC West. That seems to be the area where the national contendership is going to usually ride through there. There's going to be one of those teams out of that division in that Final Four. Thought at the beginning of the year it might be Alabama, not so much now. Thought maybe it'd be Auburn. Not so much now.
Definitely not.
Can you believe in a team from Mississippi? Because Mississippi State certainly wasn't that team a couple of years ago. Now, is Ole Miss really going to make the charge?
Well, I'm not sure that Ole Miss is necessarily as good of a team as they showed against Alabama. They were very fortunate. They started drives, I think it was 4 drives within the Alabama 35 or something ridiculous due to the fumbles and off kickoffs. They fumbled 2 in a row, and then the third one they mishandle and the guy just falls on it. So it's like, I'm just taking a knee. So I'm not completely sold on them yet. However, they certainly showed some signs that they're a good football program, and they were good last year. And I'm also not completely sure that Alabama has their quarterback. I'm not sure if Coker is who they need to go forward with either.
Yeah, and I think the thing about it is for Ole Miss, it looks great to beat Alabama, and it's a huge win. But it's uncharacteristic for Alabama teams to continually turn the ball over. That's just, you catch Saban every now and then, and you take advantage when you do. And they've dropped some games like this to, a couple of years back, it was South Carolina. And they just always seem to have this every once in a while, especially when the hype really starts to build on Alabama, which shows up every year, but when it really starts to build. But for Ole Miss, I don't want to discredit it completely, because this is a team that, while they did play some cupcake games in the beginning of the season for them, they also put up 70 points in back-to-back weeks, and that hadn't been done in a long time. And then you go in and you play Alabama and you win, and they deserve some credit, and so does Chad Kelly. And I mean, who knows if this will play out for the rest of the season? A lot of times, like you said about Mississippi State, you start hot and then you trail off at the end of the season. This won't matter then. But if he can really corral them like he has so far, they could be a team we look at the end of the year.
On Sunday you heard so much talked about, is this the end of the Alabama dynasty? They had a questionable finish to last year, haven't really gotten out of the gate strong this year by Alabama standards necessarily. At what point in time do you lend some credibility to that? Or is this just the case of an elite team finding that there are other good teams out there?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a product of an arms race that Alabama probably created when you really look at it. I mean, they were the team to beat. They won 3 national championships, and everybody Roll Tide. Everybody who didn't have a college team all of a sudden championed the phrase Roll Tide, and so you put that target on your back, and teams start coming for you, and that's what happened with Ohio State last
Harvey
year.
Updike.
Yeah, exactly.
He's big on the Roll Tide.
Yeah, I mean, those expectations that they've set up for themselves, or even for Alabama, just unattainable, and should not be the standard or what you would look for every single year. You cannot win the national championship every single year, especially in big-time college football. Like I said, I think, a lot of those guys they've recruited, like a Coker, came in very highly talented. Yeah. Everyone at Alabama comes in with, 4 or 5 stars next to their name. But that doesn't always translate to success on the field. So I think Nick Saban is getting some criticism that's kind of unwarranted because, like I say, you cannot win the title every single year.
And the thing about it, too, though, is for Alabama, with having the playoff now, 1 loss doesn't kill you. Most likely, there's not going to be 4 undefeated teams at the end of the year.
And if they win that division, that will give them enough credibility.
Exactly.
To
and they have the reputation to make it, and a playoff actually works in their favor because that's a team that, Saban always reminds me of Belichick. You can beat Belichick once in a year, but chances are you're not going to beat him twice. Yeah. And so they'll figure it out.
And, in some people's opinion, winning the SEC West is like winning the national championship.
Right.
So,
especially as of late.
All right, so take that to the opposite side of the spectrum. One of the less competitive divisions in college football would be the SEC East, a division that Georgia looks like they're just going to win by default. You have one of the most lackluster games of 2-0 SEC teams ever in Florida taking on Kentucky. That would have been a better basketball game than it was a football game. But the big story here is South Carolina. Now, I don't think anybody predicted the Gamecocks to be good, but I don't think everybody predicted the Spurrier regime to come to this crashing halt. I mean, they look bad against a Georgia team that never plays them well. How far have the Gamecocks fallen?
Well, they looked bad against Kentucky, too. I mean, this is just so surprising to me because this is a team that perennially wins 9 or 10 games. They're never good enough to win the SEC championship and really take the leap. But there's been great teams in the SEC during that time. But to see it come to a crashing end like this is just sad. I mean, you can't even really beat North Carolina. You're an SEC team and you struggled to beat UNC Chapel Hill. It's got to be frustrating for them, and it's very hard to watch.
Yeah, watching them on offense is like watching a train wreck. Yeah. I mean, it is hard to watch, and like you said, they struggled against Carolina, even though they did end up winning that game. Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see how they try to turn it around, but at least they are in the East. Maybe if they get on a good streak there, that they can maybe come back. Missouri looked terrible in the East as well.
Gosh, yeah.
That was a hard game to watch. Against UConn, exactly, and it was at home. It was at Missouri. So
9-6 final.
9-6, and the thing about that game was UConn faked the field goal at the end to tie it, trying to win, and they lost it. So I mean, that game could have one play swung that whole game.
It's interesting too, and this is the new dynamic for college football and how this plays out. All right, so at the end of the year, if you see that the AAC is not quite at the top of that Group of 5 list, and we've talked about before, Group of 5 team, the elite team out of that group goes into one of those New Year's Day games. Now, the elite conference out of that group, the one that has the highest rating, gets more money out of the college football playoff share. The AAC misses that by 1 game. Don't you think that every athletic director in that league is saying, kick the freaking field goal? Because that will cost millions of dollars for the league, and certainly an opportunity for exposure too. So one of those other storylines that plays out a little bit. ACC football, Not a lot to write home about here. Georgia Tech Notre Dame was an intriguing game. Notre Dame flexed the muscle, but I still think even though Georgia Tech lost this game, they proved that they're going to be one of the competitive teams year long in the ACC because they took a pretty good Notre Dame team and at least made it a fight at the end.
Yeah, I was somewhat surprised that Georgia Tech lost this game. I felt like they would come in and Notre Dame would not be able to stop them, at all. And especially with Notre Dame, working out their quarterback situation, I didn't have a whole lot of confidence in the Irish, but they, were able to come out there and get the win. You mentioned UNC Chapel Hill. They, played a terrible Illinois team. I did not think that game was going to be as lopsided as it was, but I guess that just shows the lack in quality of the lower part of the Big Ten.
Yeah, but to defend Chapel Hill a little bit, while they did lose to South Carolina week 1, there was also 3 red zone turnovers right in the end zone. It's a team that just was struggling with turning the ball over, that's kind of figuring it out. And I mean, in the ACC, there's really just a few top teams in that conference. So they're not gonna be at the top. That's going to be reserved for Clemson, Florida State, those teams. But they're on their way up, and they're not as bad as people are giving them credit for.
Interesting. We talked about Clemson-Louisville being an intriguing matchup last week on the show, and Clemson kind of survived that game, I think you can say. But now you look at Louisville; they're 0-3. They've got a good chance, a really good chance after their first 6 games to be at best 1-5. Is Bobby Petrino the kind of coach that's going to put his arms around everybody and nurture his team back up, or is he just going to berate them to the point where this team just shuts it down? I think there are a lot of people think that it could be the latter rather than the former.
Yeah, it doesn't look good for them. And I mean, you talk about losing this week is not that surprising versus Clemson, but you don't want to start 0-3. 0-3 in college football tanks your season. It really does. If you have any sort of aspirations to be in any sort of great bowl, I guess. And for Louisville, it's sad because they're just a few years removed from Teddy Bridgewater and those guys really making them a solid team, a team that surprised a lot of people year in and year out. And it's just crazy how quick you can fall if you don't keep up with that recruiting and coaching.
And there's more salt in that wound, because the game against Clemson was close.
Yeah.
If they get blown out in ways you can kind of, I guess if you're a Louisville fan, mentally prepare yourself for, okay, wow, this season might be pretty bad. Even though we're 0-2, we saw this game against Clemson, we could get it turned around. But with the way it ended and with it being as close as it was, it shows that they are talented enough to win games, particularly in the ACC. But, I'm not sure. Possibly the head games, like you mentioned, might be a little too much to get it turned around this season.
You've got Clemson Notre Dame coming up here in the not-too-distant future. That's going to have some intrigue to it from a national perspective. But, I think one of the things that sticks out about Clemson after seeing them in person, to go up and win a game like that, gut through a team that was scrapping to, like you said, avoid going 0-3, it shows you a little bit about what kind of team they've got. If a Clemson team loses that game, I mean, that's their game where they Clemson, when the school becomes a verb.
Yep.
They powered right through that this time around, and they powered through it with the defensive side of the football. You hear all you want to about the offensive side for the Tigers, but I think if they're going to win and win big this year, it's going to be on the heels of their defense.
And it's impressive, too, because they lost how many players to the NFL draft? I mean, I can think of Vic Beasley off the top of my head, but nine starters. I knew it was high. I thought it was 7 or 8, but they lost that many starters and have looked great to start the season. I mean, including the App State game, they looked awesome, but App even is a little bit lower on the totem pole to Louisville, and they've continued to look great. And that it's just, if they're going to win, you're right, it's got to be on the back of them, because too often they start to falter at the end of the season and the offense can't pick it up.
And if you're a Clemson fan, like you said, you were looking at this game and thinking, this might be the game that we Clemson and aren't able to get over the hump and possibly knock us out of contention for the playoff. So hopefully that bodes well for them, and they won't have that moment the rest of the season.
All right, so let's talk App State here. The Mountaineers back on the field this week against Old Dominion. Good Sun Belt Conference USA game. Two teams that have a lot of similarities. Both just made the transition to the FBS. I know you guys are probably excited to get these guys back at home here in a couple of weeks, but this is one of those matchups that could offer an opportunity to really have kind of a standard-bearing victory. A win against a Conference USA opponent, no matter who it is, that's something to hang your hat on.
Yeah, and I mean, when the win so far this year was against Howard, we kind of all anticipated that, and then a tough showing against Clemson. This would be a great way to start to build that momentum again. To try to build what they had at the end of last season, and I think if they go into this game and just control win the turnover battle first of all. get the ground game going again. I think one of the big things that got lost in the App State-Clemson game was how well Terrence Upshaw played.
Yeah.
He looked great. I mean, Marcus Cox ended up breaking 100 yards there at the end of the game, but Terrence Upshaw looked good. And I expect to have both of them in high power for this week.
I think this game against Old Dominion can be a good indicator for possibly the rest of the season. Like you said, the game against Howard, you're expected to win. Frankly, against Clemson, you're expected to lose.
Sadly.
This game is, is one against the team in Old Dominion that, like you said, is in Conference USA, is somewhat of a more respected league among the group of 5, and has been a team that has been able to compete at a fairly high level. They played NC State this past week. I watched that game. There was times during that game where they looked pretty good, and it'll certainly take the Mountaineers' best showing.
Yeah, knock on wood here. Old Dominion is a team that has big play capability, and that's one thing Appalachian's defense hasn't gotten blasted on, at least in the run game yet this year. We saw Clemson hit a few big pass plays, and they're expected to. They've got elite receivers and a Heisman candidate quarterback.
And they weren't that out of position is the thing. We talked about that, right. Is that it's a lot of times it was just, a more athletic player going out and out muscling a touchdown.
It'd be an interesting matchup to see Appalachian's rush defense. If they can continue to play solidly as they have to start the year. Ray Lowry for Old Dominion came into week 3 rather, as the leading rusher in the country. Now his 219 yards he was averaging at the time came against Eastern Michigan and Norfolk State. So it wasn't necessarily the greatest indicator, but NC State shut him down. Only 15 yards, I believe, on 12 carries. He had one big play in the passing game. But again, if Appalachian can be formidable in the run game, this is an Old Dominion team that built itself as a passing team the last several years, but graduated their quarterback, 2 of their best receivers. It's not the same dynamic offense there. So if you're looking for a key in this one, I think it's going to be shutting down the run, making Old Dominion one-dimensional, and that could be just what Appalachian needs to turn the corner and get a key, really solid road win, too.
And I think the running game is that much more important after watching the game against NC State. I think it was Howard, I believe, for Old Dominion had 2 or 3 drops, that would have really helped them extend that drive.
One in the end zone.
One in the end zone, exactly. Yeah. And, for me, watching that game, just as a fan of football, you're like, wow, that's heartbreaking, That would have been a huge play for them. So I have a whole lot of faith in Appalachian's front 7. I feel like even against Clemson, runs straight up the middle weren't doing a whole lot. If they could bounce it to the outside, then maybe they could beat us to the inline or to the corner. But I feel like we'll handle Lowry pretty good.
And this is coming off of a game where Ronald Blair imposed his will on a very legitimate Clemson offensive line. I mean, they had one freshman, but he was a standout. We talked about him. And so to see him play against, talent that's more like what App is going to play going into conference, this is going to be a really good indication of how dominant he can be.
Sounds like him making the transition and playing a little bit of nose, too, really helped his NFL stock some. Lots of scouts around the building again last week, kind of following up with him, and he'll be drawing attention for the rest of the year. Speaking of NFL here, opportunity to transition into some of these games over the weekend. If kind of carries the theme that we talked about last week. If you are an elite player on a team, put bubble wrap around yourself because they just keep dropping like flies. It's unbelievable. Now Tony Romo's out for a bit of time. He announced earlier today no surgery needed, so that will lessen the time. But if you're a fan of the Dallas Cowboys, now you're without 2 big pieces of that offense. I mean, are you shaky in Big D now? I mean, apparently the owner is as nervous or upset as a crooked cricket.
Oh, yeah.
I have no idea what that was about.
A Jerry Jones isn't. But if you're the Cowboys, you should be terrified because last season you go 12-4 on the back of DeMarco Murray. Tony Romo plays well. He's not turning the ball over a lot. And Des Bryant leads the league in touchdown receptions. Now you enter this year, you don't have DeMarco Murray, although he didn't look great. I mean, they played him. He didn't look great. But
he's
in the
rushing
Cowboys
as effectively for them as
exactly.
Right now,
Exactly. I wonder what the deal is there. But and then you lose Tony Romo. And the sad thing about it was you saw Tony Romo get up after the injury, and he said, I mean, you could see him mouthing it. He's like, it's broken. He knew it. He knew it right off the bat. And Troy Aikman was just like, oh my goodness, here we go. And now, and the bigger part of that is that the news came out that Des Bryant's foot injury, which was supposed to be a 4 to 6 week injury, is now going to also be an 8 to 10 week injury. The Cowboys better hope that Brandon Weeden has been, really taking his reps seriously because they're in very bad shape.
Carolina Panthers battled the Houston Texans. Good App State tie-in here that Kendall Lamb played almost the entire second half at right tackle for Houston. Did fairly well, provided some opportunities opportunity for Ryan Mallett to help bring the Texans back, but ultimately the Panthers won this game with their defense. It never felt like a game the Panthers were going to lose, but it definitely felt like they left opportunities to make it a wider margin on the field. Big 14-point swing right before halftime. I mean, I don't know that Carolina, after a few weeks here, has a good feel for what they can do offensively yet, because A, you haven't seen their top talent, but B, they don't look like they've hit that mesh point just yet.
Yeah, underwhelming is what I would kind of consider this
great
game.
way to say it.
You know, like you said, I never felt like they were going to lose, but I felt like they were trying their darndest not to win. So I think defensively they had a pretty decent game against a Ryan Mallett-led offense.
Yeah.
It's fairly easy to have a good defensive showing. I did feel like they did a decent job against J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney, even though for the most part they were pushing themselves up into Cam's face. When they did that, he eluded pressure. He had some nice runs. I think back to the run he had for the touchdown where he kind of somersaulted, landed on his feet.
That was pretty cool.
It was pretty nice. But I'm not sure that we know what the Panthers are going to look like going forward, because I don't know if they know. I don't know if they got it figured out yet through these first two games.
Ryan Mallett, was a backup quarterback in a game against Appalachian. You remember the game? Michigan Wolverines. He was Chad Henne's backup.
Wow,
he was supposed to play a lot in that game and didn't. And that's why he's not. That's not why he's not successful now. He didn't get that time.
That's exactly what it is. Panthers, though, it's a big. You say it didn't look great, but you know what? A win's a win in the NFL, and to win without Luke Kuechly, everybody was
AJ Klein played well.
Yeah, and the defense, if they stepped up and played well, yes, it's Ryan Mallett, but this is still an NFL offense, and to get wins, sometimes you got to scrape one out, and they did that. So
speaking of wins. We had some picks last week for Monday Night Football. I don't know if it's possible for us to show the scoreboard of the picks last week, because I'm confused as to how this. Oh, look, 0, 0, 0. Ashton wasn't even here. She didn't get any right. 2 for me. And my picks were completely bogus. Yet, why? Why was your expert analysis not good enough and my just absolutely whimsical analysis was?
We were talking pre-show that myself, Chris, Ashton, we all use conventional wisdom while picking those games.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be a layup, David, but it wasn't.
Block your shot at the rim is what happened there. All right, so we've got Monday night picks. What's even the game? The Colts and
Colts Jets.
Jets.
Yeah, Colts Jets.
Yeah, Colts Jets, teams that end in S. All right, so give us your predictions.
I mean, I have the Colts, so I guess that means you'll go with the Jets. But, I think Andrew Luck.
Take out all the suspense.
I think Andrew Luck will be good enough to get the win against the Jets. I'm not sure about their defense at all, but I'm looking for big things from the Stanford man.
I think Luck is going to be looking to rebound after a tough performance in Buffalo, and it's the Jets. At the end of the day, it's the Jets with Ryan Fitzpatrick at the helm. So
exactly,
I can't pick them. Can't do it.
All right. So Ashton, not here again, as everyone can notice. She has a pick. I believe she went with the Colts as well.
Mm-hmm.
Surprise there.
Big time Colts fan.
I was about to say that's really why she's not here. This whole
She's
schoolwork
tailgating
thing is absolutely nothing. All right. So I'm going to go with the Jets, all right? And here is why. Because I'm fairly certain, and I'm not 100%, but I'm fairly certain there's a guy on my fantasy team that plays for the Jets, so I'm going to go with that guy. I can't remember exactly who it is. That's full disclosure. I'm pretty sure, though, that I remembered I had an active player on Monday night and he didn't play for the Colts. So that's the way we're going to go with this. Now, speaking of this matchup here, though, the way that the NFL has broken down now through 2 weeks, and we'll see what happens with this game tonight. Any surprises out there in terms of teams that have played better than you thought in 2 weeks, teams that have not been as effective in 2 weeks? What's your surprise team?
I go to the Baltimore Ravens.
Ooh,
I have a few friends that are Ravens fans, and they are just dying because they don't know, what direction they're going. Now that you have Terrell Suggs out, that defense looks very shaky. David Carr at times was looking like Tom Brady in that game. So definitely they're my biggest disappointment.
Yeah, I would have to say the Philadelphia Eagles just because of how much hype they got. I just think that Chip Kelly attracts so much attention. And he made all these moves, got rid of all these key players.
$51 million in running backs.
Yeah, and the saddest part of the whole thing for Philadelphia is the amount of money they spent on Byron Maxwell. I saw this earlier today, and it floored me. He's making $60 million, and yet so far this season, quarterbacks have a perfect passer rating against him.
Wow.
It's not where you want to have your money invested at all.
Apparently not. I'll say biggest surprise, and this is a stretch, and I'm going to make a bold prediction right here too, all right? I think the Jacksonville Jaguars have been interestingly impressive. They didn't beat the Panthers, but they were competitive.
Yep.
Won yesterday. I'm going to predict that they will finish the season at 8-8. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team at 8-8, even in that division, but I think they have got a chance, mainly because of their schedule. I think they've got a chance to actually be a team that going into the last week of the season, they're playing for 500.
Yeah, they had some big pickups. Getting Julius Thomas is huge for them. He hasn't even played yet, and they've played pretty well. But, watching Bortles play last year and throw so many interceptions and really didn't look the part, it's good to see him going from year 1 to year 2 and showing improvement there.
I think he's looked off. But he did it. His checkdowns were impressive.
Yeah.
In the preseason, that's carried over the regular season thus far. It doesn't look like he's rushing as much.
Yep.
And when you bring in an experienced tight end to this mix, I think that's going to give him another weapon. Still a lot of young, unproven talent there. The back end of their defense, and I'm not just saying this because there's an App State guy there. Demetrius McCray started for them at corner. But the back end of their defense, especially when they get Cyprian healthy, I think is going to be one of the better defensive backfields in the NFL. So, again, if you're looking for a team to pick as a sweetheart, not a playoff team, but a sweetheart down the stretch, I think Jacksonville could be one of those teams. Real quick picks, App and Old Dominion. What do you got there?
Oh, you got to go App State, I think. We talked about it.
You pay tuition here, you might as well.
Yeah, exactly. Might as well.
Yeah, I got App by a couple touchdowns. I think it'll be a pretty good game, but I think the offense flexes its muscles and the defense shuts down Lowry.
Any specifics as to your pick other than the tuition?
Besides the tuition, I just think that App State is going to be ready. Coming off a bye week, that's always tough to play a team coming off a bye week because they have all that time. They don't spend the whole time feet kicked up, just relaxing. They've been practicing and getting ready to go. And coming off of Clemson, all those players were ready to be back out there. We did an article, we talked about them going into the bye weeks, and Marcus Cox, Taylor Lamb, all of them were like, look, we don't even want the bye week. We want to be playing right now because they want to make up for that loss.
Well, we'll see how it all transpires. We'll wrap that game up for you right here again next week. It's last call at Sports Bar, but before we go, we'd like to invite you to contact us at www.watchapptv.com. Until next time, I'm David Jackson. Thanks for tuning in. So long, everybody. Yay.